Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our tribute event co-sponsored by the Utah Center for Legal Inclusion and Women Lawyers of Utah. We're really excited to have all of you with us to celebrate the life and legacy of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. As we let everyone join the call, I am just going to have a short tribute to Justice Ginsburg, and then we're going to turn over the time to Justice Durham. But excuse me, Justice Ginsburg was truly an icon and a hero for many of us on this call and for millions of people across the country and perhaps throughout the world. One of the things that struck me most in the days following her death a couple of months ago was the incredible depth and breadth of her influence. As a woman lawyer myself, I understood that many in the legal profession, particularly women, felt the pain of her death. And I even openly cried unexpectedly, even though I never had the opportunity personally to meet Justice Ginsburg. But in talking with many others, I realized many non-lawyers had similar reactions as well. In an article written about Kate McKinnon's portrayal of Justice Ginsburg on Saturday Night Live, the author stated, McKinnon played RBG as an extremely tiny woman with a massive attitude and unerringly correct opinions, the sort of person you'd want on your side in both a civil rights case or a back alley knife fight. The impression celebrated what had captured so many people's imaginations about Justice Ginsburg. Here was this octogenarian who had already lived an accomplished life devoted to scholarship, civil service, and women's rights, who was pumping iron and putting on her good accessories to go to work for us. I really loved this article and this statement because I think it captured well for me the reasons that Justice Ginsburg meant so much to so many. So to start us off today, I wanted to share a video, and this was created by PBS NewsHour honoring Justice Ginsburg. I really loved this piece because it features many clips of Justice Ginsburg herself and hits on many of the wonderful things we all loved about her. So we'll share that and allow more people to join us before we hear from Justice Durham. Let me move over to sharing my screen and we can go from there.
In my lifetime, I expect to see 3, 4, perhaps even more women on the high court bench, women not shaped from the same mold, but of different complexions.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on her way to becoming the second woman on the Supreme Court when she made that prediction.
Serving on this court is the highest honor, the most awesome trust that can be placed in a judge.
Her confirmation in 1993 marked the pinnacle of a legal career that broke gender barriers. She was born Ruth Joan Bader in 1933 in Brooklyn, New York, to parents of Ukrainian and Austrian descent. She cited those immigrant roots as a source of strength and encouragement at this naturalization ceremony for new citizens in 2018.
What is the difference between a bookkeeper in New York City's Garment District and a Supreme Court justice? One generation, my own life bears witness. The difference between the opportunities available to my mother and those afforded me.
The young Ruth Bader graduated first in her class from Cornell University in 1954. That same year, she married Martin Ginsburg. He became a lawyer and encouraged her to do the same.
I have had the great good fortune to share life with a partner truly extraordinary for his generation, a man who believed at age 18 when we met that a woman's work, whether at home or on the job, is as important as a man's.
Ginsburg was one of just 9 women in her entering class at Harvard Law School. It was 1956. The dean admonished the women for taking spots that could have gone to men. Despite that, she became the first woman to join the prestigious Harvard Law Review. and all the while cared for her young children and her husband recovering from cancer. Ginsburg ended up transferring to Columbia Law School and graduated first in her class. Many law firms still balked at hiring women, but she landed teaching jobs and eventually became Columbia Law School's first female tenured professor. During the 1970s, she worked with the American Civil Liberties Union, arguing 6 landmark cases on gender equality before the U.S. Supreme Court, and winning 5 of them.
Sex, like race, has been made the basis for unjustified, or at least unproved assumptions concerning an individual's potential to perform or to contribute to society.
In 1980, President Carter named Ginsburg to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. It was another milestone moment, as she told the NewsHour in 2016.
It would not be a realistic ambition for a woman to want to become a federal judge. It was not realistic until Jimmy Carter became our president. He looked around at the federal judiciary and said, "That's nice, but they all look like me." That's not how the great United States looks.
Ginsburg served on the appeals court for 13 years, until President Clinton nominated her to the Supreme Court. She was overwhelmingly confirmed by the Senate.
I, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, do solemnly swear,
And went on to become one of the court's most prolific writers and frequent questioners, as well as the senior member of its liberal bloc. In 1996, Ginsburg wrote the majority opinion that the all-male Virginia Military Institute could no longer refuse to admit women. In 2000, she strongly disagreed with the Bush v. Gore decision that cemented George W. Bush's win in the presidential race. Her dissent omitted the customary use of the word respectfully. Still, Ginsburg became close friends with an ideological opposite, conservative colleague Antonin Scalia. She eulogized him after his death in 2016.
Once asked how we could be friends given our disagreement on lots of things, Justice Scalia answered, "I attack ideas. I don't attack people. Some very good people have some very bad ideas."
Late in life, Ginsburg gained new, younger admirers with a scathing dissent to a decision that gutted part of the Voting Rights Act. It inspired a Tumblr blog called Notorious RBG, a nod to the late rapper Notorious B.I.G.
Notorious B.I.G. and I had something in common. We were both born and bred in Brooklyn, New York.
Thanks to the blog and a book by the same name, the soft-spoken, diminutive octogenarian Justice became an unlikely celebrity, complete with t-shirts and other merchandise bearing her likeness. Her life story even made it to the big screen, twice. The documentary RBG was released in May of 2018.
I ask no favor for my sex. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks.
It offered a behind-the-scenes look at her rise to star status on the high court. And the 2018 feature film, On the Basis of Sex, starring Felicity Jones as Ginsburg, chronicled her early legal career.
If the law differentiates on the basis of sex, then how will women and men ever become equals?
Privately, Ginsburg also faced a number of health complications. In 1999, she was diagnosed with colon cancer. A decade later, she was treated for pancreatic cancer. In 2014, she underwent a heart procedure to have a stent implanted. Then came surgery for lung cancer in 2019. But Ginsburg never slowed down for long, working out with a personal trainer twice a week. And she remained a staunch advocate for women and minorities in the courtroom and beyond. In the end, her prediction came true. Over the years, she shared the Supreme Court bench with 3 other female justices, Sandra Day O'Connor, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan.
People ask me sometimes, when do you think it will be enough? When will there be enough women on the court? And my answer is, when there are 9.
Okay. Well, I just love that that tribute and the clips of Justice Ginsburg. But now we'll be pleased to hear from our very own Justice Christine Durham, who is a pioneer in our state and in the nation in her own right. And Justice Durham, I have a very brief bio to share about her, and then we'll jump in. I apologize, my screen just went blank. Okay, here we go. Christine Durham retired from the Utah Supreme Court in 2017 after serving as a justice for 35 years, with 10 of those years spent as Chief Justice and Chair of the Utah Judicial Council. She continues to be actively involved in Utah's legal profession, including as co-chair of our organization, the Utah Center for Legal Inclusion, and of Utah's Coordinating Committee on Access to Justice. She also practices at Zimmerman Brewer in Salt Lake City and has held many, many additional roles and served in many, many other organizations over her career. She's also received many awards, both in Utah and nationally, that we won't go through right now, but we are so proud to call her one of our own. And I'll now turn the time over to Justice Durham for our keynote address.
Take myself off Zoom first of all. Thank you so much for that introduction, Melinda, and for sharing PBS's video. It's really delightful. It's especially lovely to see pictures of Ruth Ginsburg as a young woman. And I love the scene at her Senate hearings of the children and grandchildren wielding their lollipops behind her. That was a lovely touch. It's daunting to provide a tribute to Justice Ginsburg. She meant so much to so many, and so much has been written and said about her legacy. So what I'd like to do is to begin with a couple of personal stories of personal connection that I've been fortunate to have in my life with her, and then to say a word or two about what life was like before Justice Ginsburg did her work, lawyer Ginsburg first and later Justice Ginsburg, and what life is like now, and then end by perhaps suggesting some ways that we might honor her legacy. I entered law school in 1968. That's such a long time ago, I can't remember. So I was about 12 years behind Ruth Ginsburg in her pioneering efforts. You need to understand that at the time she was in law school, and when I entered law school, somewhere between 2 and 3% of the legal profession in the United States was comprised of women. So between 2 and 3%, that's how sparse on the ground we were in those days. When I was in law school, Duke University Law School had no women on the faculty. I think this was true at Harvard as well. No women in the administration, and very few women in my entering years, although by the time I graduated in 1971, that was beginning to increase. In the year 1970, when I was a third-year student, we formed a student law caucus for women law students. And we went to the administration and we said, look, we'd like to have some kind of a seminar on women in the law. And there was nobody to teach it, so we were willing to take on the burden of putting together our own curriculum and figuring out what to study. But we did ask for some money to bring in outside speakers. And the administration cooperated. They gave us money for outside speakers. We had some wonderful people come. I remember one, a woman named Barbara Babcock, who's gone on to become a scholar at Stanford Law School and written a book on the history of women in law in California and so on. She came down and spoke to us, but by far the most impact was had by a young law professor at Rutgers Law School in New York, who came down to talk to us about her work in women and the law. Her name was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And so the 12 of us just had her to ourselves for a session and a dinner. We had a wonderful time, and I don't remember a lot that she said other than of the specifics, but there are two things that stand out. The first thing was that she was working on a casebook, which would become the first casebook in the nation on law casebook on women in the law. It was called Sex Discrimination and the Law. And she was working on materials. And in fact, she shared with our group some of the materials that she was collecting for that undertaking. And later on in my career, I had the opportunity to teach sex discrimination and the law out of her casebook, and that was a great pleasure. But the other thing that she pointed us to were the debates that were then going on in Congress with respect to the Federal Equal Rights Amendment. And one was aware in the news generally that the Federal Equal Rights Amendment was under discussion, but it was the first time that I'd really understood the impact that this would have on the question of women's rights. And so at her encouragement and instruction, one of the things we did during our year or our semester in our seminar was to get the copies of the congressional hearings once they were published, and to review those and see what the debate was all about. And this was at the beginning. There was little to no legal literature, so we were doing our research from the original sources. When I graduated that spring, in the spring of 1971, that was about the time, by the way, that Ruth Ginsburg was on her way to found and head the first ACLU's division of women's rights and women's issues. One of the things that happened to me on my path was that the Association of Legal Secretaries in the state of North Carolina invited me to come and give a speech on the Federal Equal Rights Amendment. And I had all that background from my seminar, and there was one law review article in the Yale Law Journal. And so I prepped for that speech and got extremely fired up. So between Ruth Ginsburg's encouragement and direction and the experiences I had after law school, I started joining in the lobbying efforts for the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment in North Carolina, and in fact, participated in a really momentous vote in the North Carolina legislature. We thought we had a tie vote for ratification. By this time, Phyllis Schlafly and her hot dogs were coming out of Texas and starting to organize against the Equal Rights Amendment. And we had a historic debate in the North Carolina Assembly with Phyllis Schlafly on one side and Martha McKay, who had spoken at the recent Democratic convention, on the other. We thought we had a tie vote, which the Speaker of the House had declared he would break in favor of ratification. 20 minutes before the floor vote, the representative from Durham, which was where I was working, changed his mind, and North Carolina became one of the first states to shut down ratification. And of course, as you know, it never reached its final goal. So, but that only spurred me on to further efforts. When I moved to Utah in '73, we had our debates and votes in '74, '75, and '76, and so I spent a great deal of time working on that effort. And in fact, with some of you on this call, I had the somewhat dismal opportunity this past legislative session to, after 50 years, be up at our state legislature begging a bunch of men for women to have equal status under the 14th Amendment and under our own amendment to the federal Constitution. They wouldn't even let it out of the rules committees. That's how nervous they were about having to take a public vote denying women a place of equality in the federal Constitution. So Ruth was really very much part of my orientation to issues affecting women in the law. And I was fortunate enough to cross paths with her a number of years later, after she was on the DC Court of Appeals and I was on the Supreme Court here in Utah, to be members together of the American Law Institute's Governing Council. And that entity, in addition to all the hard work they do, also has a wonderful collegiality and association. And I got acquainted with Ruth on a personal level. Of course, I'd followed her career, I'd followed her decisions. I was a huge supporter of her getting on the DC circuit. And later, of course, of her getting on the court. But one of the things that I had the opportunity to do was to actually develop a personal bond with her, in that at one of our meetings, we were sitting together at dinner and sort of sharing life experiences. And she said something to me, which she's said many times publicly, and you all have heard it and know it, which is that one of the luckiest and smartest things she ever did in her life was to marry Marty Ginsburg, someone who, as you heard on the video, thought that women and men should have equal opportunities for their work, not just in the home, but in the workplace and in the halls of power. I likewise made that choice at a very young age. Also met my husband when we were both 18, went to school together and married him in significant part, there are lots of reasons, but in significant part because he was the only man I'd ever met who obviously considered my life's work as important as his life's work. And both of those, shared with our joint commitment to family and to family values, has made ours a very successful two-career marriage. So let me just talk a little bit. I've made some reference to what life was like in the legal profession. When Ruth was starting out, I came across, let me just read to you what Jill Lepore, a well-known American historian, wrote in the New Yorker. She said, born the year that Eleanor Roosevelt became First Lady, Ginsburg bore witness to, argued for, and helped to constitutionalize the most hard-fought and least appreciated revolution in American history, the emancipation of women. Aside from Thurgood Marshall, no single American has so wholly advanced the cause of equality under the law. So when Ginsburg was starting out, the kinds of things that women were affected by included pregnancy. One of the problems she had in getting a job after law school, she had a whole raft of problems. First of all, she was a woman. Second, she was a Jew. Third, she was a mother. And fourth, she was pregnant at some point in time. None of which helped her and all of which counted against her. I had a teaching job after my undergraduate experience in a community college in Boston, and I got pregnant during the job, and I was told at the end of the year, thank you so much for your service, but of course, we won't expect you back next year. That turned out to be okay. I went to law school instead, but still. Also, so you had pregnancy issues, you had credit issues. Women could not obtain credit in their own names. They couldn't get loans. They had to have a husband or a father or some responsible male co-sign on any efforts for credit. In fact, I remember the first time I tried to get a credit card in Durham, North Carolina in the early 70s. I had to get it in my married name rather than independent credit. You had equal pay problems. It was so common for women to be paid less for the same jobs, the same titles, the same work, that nobody even talked about it. It was just the way the world was. At my law school, and this happened at many law schools in that era, a number of law firms, especially from the big cities like New York and so on, would often specify when they would come to interview at the law schools, they'd specify that they wanted to see only male law review graduates. That was their world. They absolutely would not interview women. And on the rare occasions when women got interviewed, they were asked about their family plans and what kind of contraceptives they were using and how much commitment they really were willing to bring to the practice of law. Women were not considered as having coverage under the equal protection provisions of the 14th Amendment. Again, it was one of those things that wasn't even discussed until Ruth Bader Ginsburg started the conversation with her ACLU project and with the cases she brought before the United States Supreme Court. The question of women and equal protection, it came up, of course, in the debates around the Equal Rights Amendment, but it again was a foreign concept in the world of law. And then finally, one of the things that did not exist in that era, well, given that the whole notion of women and equal protection weren't even connected, it's no surprise that in fact, there was no connection between concepts of equality on the one hand and concepts of due process, personal autonomy. I mean, Ruth Ginsburg actually, with some frequency in her later years, criticized Roe v. Wade on the basis that the court decided the case too narrowly, that it decided the case on the basis of personal autonomy and due process rights rather than on the basis of equal protection. And, you know, she was very strong on the notion, again, that you heard her express in terms of her relationship with her husband and her partner, the notion that women deserve to be able to chart their own courses as independent human beings without government allowing barriers to be placed in their way. She quoted that wonderful phrase from Ida B. Wells, you know, get your feet off our necks. That was her closing argument in one of her cases before the United States Supreme Court. So just some personal examples for her. I read recently about what was going on in the Nixon administration when he had an opening on the court to fill, and there was some discussion about a woman. Nixon was not particularly amenable to that. And this is the part I didn't know, but Chief Justice Warren Burger told President Nixon that if he appointed a woman to the United States Supreme Court, Burger would retire. He would resign from the court. When I read that, I thought, oh my goodness, because I remember an incident in 1979. I was part of the founding of the National Association of Women Judges, and we were able to hold our meeting, I think it was either 1980 or 81 in Washington, D.C. And through connections, we were able to get a reception at the United States Supreme Court. And Warren Burger, who was still chief, came to our reception, and he walked into the library, the large library where we were assembled. There were probably about 40 of us, I think, at the time. He stood up and he looked around and he said, "Are all of you women really judges?" He was just dumbfounded. But at least he didn't resign from his court as a consequence. So, you know the other stories. Erwin Griswold, who castigated the women for taking up seats. Felix Frankfurter declined an application from Ruth Ginsburg for a clerkship, saying he was not ready for a woman clerk. So life was quite different in Ruth's era. So what has she left as her legacy? Probably the most significant part of her legacy is causing the United States Supreme Court to read women into the Constitution and to acknowledge that equality under the law is a guarantee that covers women, something that had not been thought to be the case for centuries and decades. It's so interesting that even in that achievement, women still do not have total parity under the 14th Amendment. The standard for determining whether discrimination based on sex or gender is a violation of the 14th Amendment. The standard is what's known as intermediate scrutiny, and all of you who read federal constitutional law know what that means. It's a pretty high standard for the entity to meet, but it is not as high a standard as we have for other categories, and particularly for racial justice. So that's, people say, well, you know, why do you still care about the Federal Equal Rights Amendment after all these years? And the answer to that is women deserve parity under the federal Constitution. It's always been very ironic for me to be aware that in our own Utah Constitution since 1895, we have had a provision that specifically guarantees equal rights under the law on the basis of sex, and a few other things. And yet, in all these years, no litigation. I was part of the development of a complaint recently that developed a claim on that issue, but the case settled, so won't see the light of day yet, but it's got to be coming, people. It has to be coming. So Ruth's impact, as Jill Lepore commented, on the law of equal rights and the cause of equality under the law simply can't, you can't calculate it. It has worked its way into our jurisprudence, and more than that, it's worked its way into our culture. I think the phenomenon of her later years, the notorious RBG phenomenon, is really a reflection of the degree to which her courage and her boldness in launching the work she did, and then doing the work she did, and then continuing the work she did after she was on the court, has inspired and enlivened the sensibilities of generations of people who care about equal rights, and most particularly generations of women, and most particularly generations of young women. I had a wonderful email from one of my former law clerks who's practicing in DC now, with pictures of his children dressed in their Halloween costumes. And his 4-year-old had a little black robe and a big lace collar and a giant gavel and great big black glasses. And I just thought, you know, that 4-year-old is growing up with a model for the way in which life should be pursued. It's not as if, however, I mean, Ruth was a very cautious litigator, as any of you who have read extensively about her know. The cases she brought in the beginning for that ACLU project were not cases of discrimination against women. They were cases of discrimination against men. And she chose that, she made that decision deliberately because she felt that it would provide her with a platform on which she could approach 9 men on the United States Supreme Court with material they could get their heads around. Because so much litigation that actually discriminated against women was regarded pretty universally, certainly by justices on the United States Supreme Court, as legislation or laws that protected women. And it wasn't until Frontiera versus Richardson you had the plurality language pointing out that so often the pedestal upon which women had been placed by the law was revealed in actuality to be a cage. And she felt the way to illustrate that was to demonstrate the ways in which men were actually discriminated against. Men, for example, who could not receive Social Security benefits for their wives' disabilities or deaths, because unless they could prove that they'd been dependent on their spouses, whereas of course women received those benefits simply by being the spouses. Actually, when Utah undertook a review of all of the gender-based language in the Utah Code in the mid to late 1970s, actually what happened, Patrice Arend, I saw her face, she may remember this, after the legislature refused to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, they said, well, you can just go and fix all the statutes. So we took them at their word and got funding for a joint task force to go through Utah's statutes and remove any vestiges that we could find. Of course, we had to do it by hand, no computers, of sex discrimination in Utah statutes, which may explain in some respects the paucity of litigation on sex discrimination in the Utah courts because of those changes that we brought about in the statutory language. But one of the things that they discovered that I was interested in it when I became a judge is that in the judge's retirement system, a judge's widow was entitled to specified benefits in the retirement system, but a female judge's widower, again, had to prove actual dependence on the judge in order to get benefit. There's another little interesting story about Justice Ginsburg, and that is that as she was preparing her briefs for the cases she was arguing before the United States Supreme Court, her secretary and proofreader one day pointed out to her that she was spending so much time typing the phrase sex discrimination, discrimination on the basis of sex, treatment on the basis of sex, and apparently said to Ruth, she said, you know, the truth is when I'm typing the word sex all of this time, you need to understand that the men who are going to be reading these briefs will not be thinking about what you want them to think about. And that was when Justice Ginsburg changed the vocabulary in a lot of her written work to talk about gender discrimination instead of sex discrimination. So again, it's difficult to imagine how much the world has changed, in part because, especially depending on your age and what you've lived through, you know, you've encountered a new world, you live in a new world, but it's important to remember that without the work of that single woman and the creation she built, the foundation she built in the law for not just the changes in litigation claims, but for the changes in legislation. I mean, for example, you think about the Lilly Ledbetter case where the United States Supreme Court, over her strong dissent, refused to expand access to the protection of equal pay provisions under procedural grounds. Congress took up the issue and changed the law. So you have this, throughout her career, you have this extensive back and forth between the legal principles she was pursuing, first as a lawyer, then as a judge, and finally as a justice. So the question then arises, with this incredible legacy that means so much to every woman on this call and every man on this call who cares about women and the role they play in our society and in our economy and in our families and in our polity, we have to think about ways in which we can and should honor that legacy. My own view, and I'm sure others have said this more eloquently and sweepingly, but my own view is that we can only honor that legacy adequately by identifying those parts of our society, those parts of our law that still remain not fully shaped to support equality before the law. I'm talking about things like economic equality, and I mean in a general and global sense, but I'm specifically talking about economic equality for women. I don't know if you follow the press and watch what's happening with the pandemic. There is considerable research demonstrating that working women in particular are losing the fight, the economic fight. Even before the pandemic, we still have equal pay problems. We still have a huge gap. And here in Utah, we have one that's larger than in most places. But the fact that the schools are closed, that this country has never invested in an infrastructure of adequate preschool and childcare education, affordable access for families to adequate and safe childcare, is meaning that women are getting hammered by the recession, and it's going to get worse. And there's some speculation that it's going to take decades to restore. The whole issue of family support is a related issue. We're the only industrialized nation in the world that does not have in place strong governmental supports for the maintenance of family stability in terms of economics, in terms of medicine and healthcare. We know that in coverage and research in medicine and healthcare, women are disadvantaged and ignored. We know, as I've mentioned already, that we still don't have constitutional parity in the federal setting. And we know, and here I cite Susan Madsen's Women in Leadership Project's recent study that just came out, identifying female representation in law, business, and state, local, and national leadership. We have so much work to do, and I think that it would be a suitable way to honor Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy to us, to pick up the unfinished business and to devote ourselves in any way we can identify and can use to bring about new progress on her goals. I just want to share with you the end of Jill Lepore's essay because I like it so much, and it quotes from a concurring opinion in the Bradwell case, which involved the right of women to get law licenses. There's a quotation that I used to use all the time when I was lobbying for the Equal Rights Amendment, because it was such a classic way to kind of sum up the kinds of attitudes that we were dealing with. Lepore wrote, a century after the ratification of the 19th Amendment, by the way, a century it has taken to get a woman in the White House. A century. Ruth Bader Ginsburg's pioneering career as a scholar, advocate, and judge stands as a monument to the power of dissent. And then quoting from Bradwell, the natural and proper timidity and delicacy which belongs to the female sex evidently unfits it for many of the occupations of civil life. We have to dissent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Justice Durham. We're all applauding from our own houses, offices, basements, wherever we may be, in our own little Zoom corners. But thank you so much for those words. We are going to now take a little break, and we have a couple of books that we're going to give away to someone on this call. So first of all, we have a Ruth Bader Ginsburg pocket quote book and a copy of My Own Words, which is a collection of writings from Justice Ginsburg. Many of you may have this book already, but we thought it might be fun to try and connect in some other ways that might not be normal. Oh, there, Justice Ginsburg has her copy right there. So I have a random name or a random, drawing app here on my computer, and I've added everyone who's in the participant list. We're going to pick some random names. Hopefully this actually is truly random. Okay, so our first winner of the pocket quote book is Heather Jacques. All right, we will, I will also at the end of this, at the end of the meeting, I will be emailing everyone to the email that you used in registration with a form where you can fill out your address and email. And to everyone will be sending a little Ruth Bader Ginsburg sticker. And then to the winners, we'll be sending the book. So Heather, I will mail that to you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. Okay, and then for the My Own Words book, our winner is Larissa Lee. And that is random, even though I love Larissa. We were co-clerks together. So I'm happy that she won that. But anyway, I will mail those out. And along with those stickers, I will send that form by email. But to close up, we, on the note that Justice Durham just left us with to, get involved and dissent in the ways that we can. We wanted to give a couple minutes to Women Lawyers President Kim Neville to talk about some of the work that Women Lawyers as an organization is doing in ways that we can be involved. And then I will talk just briefly about Euclid and some ways that people might want to get involved there as well. So I'll turn the time to Kim now.
Hi, Melinda. Thank you for giving us a spot in your program and for letting us co-sponsor and for wonderful tribute. And thank you to Justice Durham for your thoughtful remarks. It's always so wonderful to hear you speak, and to have such a leader in our bar for so many women is really just a privilege. So we're always happy to hear from you. On behalf of Women Lawyers, I want to thank you for attending today, and also to let you know kind of what we're up to. As you may know, Women Lawyers is the organization that promotes the advancement and retention of women in Utah in the legal profession. We're very proud of the work we do. A couple of things that you may know or may have heard about is a major project that we call the Initiative, which was started in 2010, led by Judge Eve First, Melanie Vardabedian, Margaret Plain, and Peggy Hunt, who I see on this call today. And they were inspirational in really trying to get some information about what are the issues that affect women in the workplace in Utah. And as some of you may know, they did a comprehensive study in conjunction with BYU and published the results in 2010, which led to some kind of disappointing conclusions about how women attack the workplace and the kind of challenges they may face. So we've set out over the last decade to try to make the workplace more inclusive, to make it a better place for women, and to hopefully make a better network and progress for women in our profession. As part of our goal, we wanted to see how we were doing. So we rebooted the initiative last year with the goal of putting out a report in 2020, telling us what the progress was head to head from 2010. We, as you might have known, did the survey in April. I'm sure many of you took that survey, and thank you for doing that. And in conjunction with USU, now have a report which will be coming out in 2 weeks. I'm disappointed to tell you that unfortunately the progress was not that great. Although we made some advancements in certain areas like better workplace policies for part-time work, paternity leave, also some advances in remote workplace situations, and I think we'll continue to evolve there given the pandemic. The things that matter to law practices and the kind of core nuts and bolts that drive law practices, equality in pay, access to management opportunities, access to mentorship, and access to first chair deal responsibility and litigation responsibility are lacking. So you'll see that report come out in the next 2 weeks. I hope you'll take the time to read it and think about, areas we can improve. What are we going to do about it? So here's the goal. We need to make improvements. We all know that, and we're looking forward to the challenge. One statistic that I saw that I think many of you will see is 60% of the ladies who responded to our survey indicated that they have no senior woman attorney working at their place of business, whether it be in a firm, government, or in a in-house counsel position. That means over 60% of our ladies don't have a role model or maybe a close advocate they can go to for help. So that's a problem. We know a few things. We know that when women are in leadership, that those organizations have lower incidents of discrimination and harassment reported. We know that they have more family-friendly policies, and we know that they lead the way in pay equality. So if we're going to make a dent in this fight, we have to get the critical mass we need on the ground in our law firms, in our organizations. So here's what we're doing. We have something we call Project Pipeline. It's been incredibly successful with our court advocacy work that we do in trying to help women who want to take the bench. We're expanding that work now to private firms and into in-house counsel positions. And what we try to do is to pair women who are in need of mentorship or maybe career guidance, help with their business plan, help with forming a network. We try to set them up with mentorship and some objective, maybe third-party advice to provide that network they need to move forward in their careers. So I'm going to be asking you for help, and so will everybody else in Women Lawyers. If you are a woman who needs this resource, if you're one of the 60% who doesn't have anyone in your firm you can reach out to, please call us. We'll help set you up with someone who can help you. If you're a woman who is successful and you've made it in your career and you have a knowledge to share, please call us, because we have people who need your help and we want to pair them with you. And if you're a man on this call and you know a woman who needs their help or could volunteer for this help, or you see a way that you could help, please call us, because we need to connect these people together. We know from experience that when we connect women with each other, when we provide a social network, a support network, ways that they can find, simple questions like, I don't have a daycare. We can connect people and find ways that can help them support their practices so they can advance in their career. So I'm going to leave you with my favorite RBG quote, which is, women belong in all places where decisions are made. And at Women Lawyers, we believe that, and I hope that you will join us in making that happen. So thank you, Melinda, for your time and for organizing this event.
Thank you so much, Kim. I just want to add that UCLE was really formed to complement the efforts being made by our affinity groups, including Women Lawyers. And I just want to reiterate what Kim just said, that connecting women with each other and connecting attorneys with each other is so critical in this work of advancing people in the profession and in the pipeline work of bringing more students into our profession, female students and students of color. So to that end, UCLE is also doing outreach efforts to schools and mentoring for students before they get to law schools, so that hopefully we can help funnel more students into Women Lawyers pipeline, project pipeline, and help to increase that critical mass that we need. And I think part of that effort is to recognize that we have so many incredible women in Utah right now in our profession. I look at this call and men who are dedicated to this cause, but I look at this call and it's really almost emotional for me to see this group of women and see many mentors of my own and see many women who I look up to and admire and who are being recognized for their efforts, including I want to recognize Margaret Plain, who was just recently honored with the Christine Durham Woman Lawyer of the Year Award, who's a wonderful role model for so many of us. Congratulations, Margaret, on that. And I know that's been highlighted in Women Lawyers emails as well, but I wanted to send my own personal thanks, or not thanks, congratulations. But I think we just need to band together and dissent collectively in the ways that we can to be able to show other women and girls and young women that the legal profession is a place where we can succeed and connect and serve. And I hope that's part of the message that we take from Justice Ginsburg's life. At least for me, that's what I've taken, is the will to continue despite obstacles. So thank you all for being here. We'll end a few minutes early, but again, watch your email for a form where you can fill out to get your stickers and to get a little card from UCLE and Women Lawyers just thanking you for being part of this. I know you probably have been on Zoom meetings all day, so I appreciate the stamina and joining us so that we can come together in the ways that we can right now. So take care, everyone, and stay healthy.